Imagine this, a $2.4 billion stealth fighter, dead on the runway. 50 of the world's best engineers can't figure it out. And the clock's ticking, 4 days before a NATO demo that could decide the future of air combat. The solution? It didn't come from a lab or a general, but from an 11-year-old girl in a dusty Nevada garage. This is the unbelievable, true-to-life story of how Pearl Clark listened to the sky and outsmarted the experts at Area 51. Before we start, drop a comment below telling me which country you're watching from. The Nevada sun wasn't just bright, it was a physical weight pressing down on the baked desert floor of Groom Lake, better known to the initiated as Area 51. Inside the sterile, climate-controlled chaos of Hangar 7, the air crackled with a different kind of heat, panic. 50 of the sharpest minds the U.S. Air Force, Lockstar Aeronautics, and associated consultancies could muster were clustered around the sleek, predatory form of Project Chimera, the future of air dominance, a sixth-generation stealth fighter prototype. Its angular, radar-absorbent skin seemed to drink the harsh fluorescent light, but its twin adaptive cycle engines, the marvels meant to propel it beyond Mach 2.5 with near-silent efficiency, were cold and silent, the heart of a mortally wounded beast. Captain Diana Phillips, her flight suit sleeves rolled up, leaned over a diagnostic console, the glow etching harsh lines onto her face. "Run it again, Mike," she ordered, her voice tight. Lieutenant Mike Chen, lead flight engineer, punched commands. On the massive overhead screen, data streams cascaded. Engine temp, nominal. Fuel flow, optimal. Turbine RPM, peak efficiency. Thrust output, 0.00 kr. Catastrophic failure with perfect vitals, Chen muttered, rubbing his temples. It makes no goddamn sense. It's like the engines are running perfectly into a void. 4 days. That was the ticking clock hanging over them all. In 4 days, Chimera was slated for the most critical NATO joint strike demonstration at Nellis AFB. Billions in international defense contracts, the future of Allied air superiority for a generation, hinged on its flawless performance, and Chimera was broken, suffering from an ailment no one could diagnose. The memory of the test flight was seared into Diana's mind. The sudden sickening lurch, the terrifying silence despite the instruments screaming green, the desperate glide back to base riding a multi-billion-dollar brick. 50 of you. Brigadier General Harlan Strickland's voice boomed across the hangar, silencing the low murmur of anxious debate. He stood ramrod straight, his face the color of old brick. 50 top pilots, engineers, PhDs who eat quantum physics for breakfast. And we are no closer to an answer than we were when Captain Phillips brought this bird back on a prayer. 4 days, people. Failure is not an option. Failure, Diana knew, wasn't just about contracts. It was about credibility. It was about showing a watching world, and increasingly aggressive adversaries, that American technological supremacy wasn't a myth. The weight felt crushing. 30 miles away, the desert town of Horizon Heights baked under the same relentless sun, but the rhythm was slower, dustier, kinder. In a converted barn behind a modest bungalow, the air smelled of oil, gasoline, and ozone. 11-year-old Pearl Clark, her brown hair escaping a messy ponytail, grease smudged like war paint on her cheek, leaned into the guts of a 1943 Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine. Her small hands moved with surprising dexterity, guided by the calm, gravelly voice of her grandfather, Walt. "See that scoring on the cam follower, Peanut?" Walt pointed a gnarled finger, his own hands resting on his walker. Retired Master Sergeant Walter Clark, once the man who kept F-4 Phantoms flying over Vietnam, now battled Parkinson's more than faulty machinery. "That ain't where. That's disrespect. Someone ran her lean, got her too hot." "Like trying to run on fumes, Grandpa?" Pearl asked, her brow furrowed in concentration as she carefully removed the part. "Exactly. Engines talk, Peanut. You just gotta listen close." Walt smiled, pride warming his tired eyes. Pearl wasn't just his granddaughter, she was his legacy, inheriting an intuitive, almost mystical understanding of machines. While other kids obsessed over screens, Pearl obsessed over schematics and the symphony of pistons and valves. The barn was their sanctuary, filled with half-restored relics. A P-51 Mustang wing section, a gutted Huey transmission, and the magnificent, slowly returning to life double wasp. A distant, thunderous boom rattled the barn windows. Pearl flinched, dropping a socket wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete floor. "Whoa," she gasped, rushing to the open door. High in the azure sky, trailing a plume of white vapor that suddenly seemed wrong, too thin, too frantic, was a dark, angular shape. It wasn't flying, it was falling, silent and terrifying despite its speed. Then a lower, straining roar, a chase plane, as the dark shape seemed to pull up agonizingly low, vanishing behind the distant ridge separating Horizon Heights from the forbidden airspace. "That wasn't right, Grandpa," Pearl whispered, her heart pounding. It sounded empty, like it stopped pushing. Walt hobbled to the door, squinting at the horizon. "Stealth bird," he murmured, his voice tight with old instincts. "Trouble, bad trouble." He knew that sound, the sudden absence of thrust. He'd heard it before, long ago, with fatal consequences. A shadow passed over his face. The next day, the town buzzed with rumors. Crashed. Near miss. Secret project gone wrong. Pearl, delivering groceries for Mr. Henderson's store, her contribution to the barn fund, overheard 2 Lockstar technicians grabbing coffee. "Total ghost in the machine, Frank," one said, lowering his voice. "Engines humming like choir boys. Thrust gauge reading goose egg. Strickland's gonna blow a gasket. 50 guys in that hangar," the other scoffed. 50. And zip. NATO's gonna laugh us out of the alliance. "Braun." Pearl stored the snippets away, her mind whirring like one of Grandpa's turbines. Engines running, no thrust. It echoed Walt's lessons about airflow, about the invisible river that gave wings lift and engines bite. Back in Hangar 7, frustration was curdling into despair. Theories had been proposed and shot down, exotic material failure, scans showed nothing, software glitch, code reviews were clean, fuel contamination, lab tests negative. Lieutenant Tyler Green, a brilliant but junior aerodynamics specialist recently transferred from MIT, stared at high-speed camera footage of the failed flight. He zoomed in, frame by frame, on the moment the thrust died. Something flickered at the wing root near the air intakes. A shimmer? A distortion in the exhaust plume. He ran a complex CFD computational fluid dynamics simulation, focusing on the unique blended wing body design of the Chimera and the carefully sculpted hidden intakes designed for minimal radar signature. The simulation churned, spitting out turbulent flow patterns under specific high-speed, high-angle of attack conditions he'd isolated from the flight data. It showed vortices forming near the intakes, swirling chaotically, potentially starving or disrupting the airflow into the engines. The engines themselves might be fine, but if the air entering them was turbulent garbage— "Sir, Captain Phillips," Green called out, waving her over to his terminal. He pointed at the swirling mess of red and orange turbulence on his screen, superimposed on the Chimera's outline. "Look at this. At the edge of the flight envelope, just before the failure, these vortices, they're forming right here, at the junction. It could be causing massive airflow distortion into the intakes. The engines are gulping chaos, not clean air. They might be running perfectly, on nothing useful." Diana peered at the simulation. It was compelling, aligning with the baffling instrument readings. Airflow disruption, not engine failure. That fits the ghost. A spark of hope ignited. Can we model a fix? Adjust the software to avoid that specific regime? Or maybe a tiny vortex generator? Before she could finish, a sharp voice cut in. "Lieutenant Green, is this more theoretical noodling?" Howard Vance, the lead Lockstar engineer, a man whose expensive suit seemed perpetually annoyed by the hangar environment, peered disdainfully at the screen. "Vortices. We modeled the airflow exhaustively. The intakes are flawless. This is a hardware or software issue, Lieutenant, not pixie dust in the air. Stick to the data we have." He turned to Strickland, who had approached. "General, this is a distraction. We need to focus on the power plant diagnostics." Green's simulation is interesting but unproven, and frankly outside his primary remit. Strickland glanced at the swirling colors, then at Vance's confident dismissal. Time was too short for academic debates. "Lock it down, Lieutenant. File the report. Vance, what's the update on the fuel injector recalibration?" The spark died as Strickland and Vance walked away. Green deflated, the weight of hierarchy pressing down. The spark, however, refused to die in Pearl Clark. That night, lying in bed, the image of the silently falling jet haunted her. Engines running, no thrust, like sucking through a bent straw. Grandpa Walt's words about the importance of smooth airflow resonated. She thought of the sleek, angular shape she'd glimpsed, so different from the rounded curves of the Mustang or the Huey. What happened when air hit those sharp edges at insane speeds? The next afternoon, tinkering with a model jet engine kit Grandpa had given her, Pearl had an idea. She grabbed her sketchbook and colored pencils. She drew the Chimera as best she remembered it, a menacing delta shape. Then she drew arrows for airflow, straight lines hitting the leading edge. But what about around the wing, near the body, where the engines sucked air in? She remembered Grandpa explaining how air could get confused near corners. She sketched furiously, drawing swirling vortices, like mini tornadoes, right where the wing met the fuselage, right in front of the intakes she imagined were hidden underneath. If those dirty tornadoes get sucked in, she drew the engine blades, spinning happily. But the thrust arrow behind was tiny. Garbage in, nothing out. It's the wing, she burst out, running into the house where Walt was dozing in his armchair. Grandpa, the stealth jet. It's not the engine, it's the wing and the scoop. Walt blinked awake. Whoa, slow down, Peanut. What wing? What scoop? Pearl thrust her sketchbook at him. The new one, the pointy secret one. When it goes super fast and turns a bit, the air gets all swirly right here. She jabbed a finger at her drawing of the wing root vortex, and that dirty air goes whoosh right into the engines. That might just be crazy enough to be true. He saw the absolute conviction in her bright eyes. All right, we gotta tell someone. Convincing someone proved impossible. Walt's call to the main base switchboard got him transferred to voicemail after voicemail. His old service number meant nothing to the young airman who finally answered. Sir, we appreciate your concern, but we have top engineers on it. Have a good day. Click. Pearl wouldn't be deterred. The next morning, clutching her sketch and a page of notes written in careful block letters, Vortex make dirty air. Engines choke, no push. She convinced Walt to drive them to the main gate of the base. The armed security forces airmen looked down at the small, grease-stained girl and the frail old man in a battered truck. Sorry, folks, no unauthorized access, especially not today, but I know what's wrong with the Chimera, Pearl declared, holding up her sketch. The airman suppressed a smile. That's nice, sweetheart. I'm sure the general will be thrilled. Now please move along. His tone was final. Dejected, they were turning around when a blue Air Force sedan pulled up to the gate. Captain Diana Phillips, exhausted and heading back to her on-base quarters after another fruitless night, rolled down her window to show her ID. She saw the old truck. The determined-looking little girl holding a colorful drawing, the old man with the resigned yet proud set of his shoulders. Problem, airman? Diana asked. Just some civilians, Captain. Little girl thinks she fixed the Chimera. The airman chuckled softly. Diana's eyes, however, locked onto the sketch in Pearl's hand. It was Pearl's drawing put into stark, simple terms. Who are you? Diana asked, her voice gentle but intense. I'm Pearl. This is my grandpa Walt. He fixed jets. I fix engines too. The air is making tornadoes right where it sucks in, Pearl stated matter-of-factly. The engines are fine. They're just eating tornadoes. Walt spoke up, his voice stronger now. Captain, I served 30 years, mostly wrenching on fighters. I heard that sound before she went quiet. Sudden loss of thrust with engines running? Korea, 52. Sabre had a similar hiccup, less severe. Modified intake lip fixed it. This feels like that, but magnified by stealth geometry. My granddaughter, she sees things. She understands machines in her bones. Diana stared at them, the retired master sergeant radiating quiet integrity, the little girl with eyes full of fierce intelligence and not a shred of doubt. Against all reason, against rank and protocol. Diana felt a desperate, fragile hope. She remembered Green's dismissed simulation. Airman, she said, her voice suddenly decisive. Open the gate. These two are with me. The sterile chaos of Hangar 7 fell silent as Captain Phillips walked in, flanked by a frail old man and a small girl clutching a crayon drawing. Brigadier General Strickland's face purpled. Phillips, what in God's name is this? A daycare field trip. We have a crisis. Sir, Diana said, projecting calm she didn't feel. This is Master Sergeant Walter Clark, retired, 30 years Air Force maintenance, and this is his granddaughter, Pearl. They believe they've identified the problem. Vance snorted derisively. Oh, for heaven's sake, are we that desperate? Captain, this is absurd. Let them speak, Mr. Vance, Diana snapped, a dangerous edge in her voice. She turned to Pearl. Go ahead, Pearl, tell them. Pearl, intimidated by the scowling general and the rows of staring experts, shrank back slightly against Walt. He squeezed her shoulder. Go on, Peanut. Tell him what you told me. Pearl took a deep breath, stepped forward, and held up her sketch. She pointed. Your jet, it has sharp wings. When it goes really fast and maybe turns a little, the air gets mad here. She tapped the wing root. It makes dirty, spinny air, like tornadoes, and your jet sucks the tornadoes right in here. She pointed to where she imagined the intakes. The engines try to eat the tornadoes, but tornadoes are yucky. So the engines work hard. She mimed, straining. But no good air comes out the back. No push. You gotta stop the tornadoes or clean the air. She finished, looking at Diana for reassurance. A wave of incredulous murmurs and outright laughter swept through the hangar. Tornadoes. Yucky air? Is this a joke? Lieutenant Green, however, pushed forward. Captain, sir, he addressed Strickland. That's almost exactly what my CFD showed. The vortices forming at the wing-body junction disrupting intake flow. She's describing aerodynamic interference. Vance stepped in front of Green. Coincidence. A child's fantasy. General, this is an insult to the professionals working around the clock. It's a waste of precious time. He shot a venomous look at Diana. Captain Phillips, your judgment is clearly compromised by stress. Perhaps you should be relieved. Strickland rubbed his temples. The absurdity was overwhelming. Yet, the little girl's description was bizarrely specific. And Green, despite his junior status, was sharp. But Vance represented Lockstar, billions of dollars and political reality. The clock was merciless. Captain Phillips, Strickland said heavily, escort these civilians off the base. Lieutenant Green, your simulation remains noted but unactionable without empirical proof. Mr. Vance, divert all resources to the engine core diagnostics. Dismissed. He turned away, shutting down the possibility. The dismissal stung, but Pearl's idea had found fertile ground in two places: Diana Phillips's desperate conviction and Tyler Green's analytical mind. Later, in Diana's cramped office, Green showed them his full simulation. She's right, Captain, he whispered. Look at this. The vortices are real. They shred the boundary layer airflow entering the intakes. We need to modify the flight control software to avoid that specific high AOA, high Mach regime, or install vortex generators. But that would take weeks we don't have. Diana looked at Pearl, who was quietly studying a complex engine schematic on Green's desk, tracing lines with her finger. Software mod, Diana murmured. A patch, to keep it out of the danger zone. It's unauthorized, untested. If I'm wrong, Green trailed off. If we do nothing, we fail for sure, Diana stated. His meeting with Strickland and Vance was private, but Diana caught the tail end as she accidentally passed by the conference room. Cannot afford speculation, General. Bradshaw's smooth voice carried. Lockstar's reputation, American jobs, the perception of stability. They hinge on this demonstration proceeding as planned with the existing proven technology. Any talk of fundamental design flaws, especially stemming from unconventional sources, his voice dripped with disdain, is detrimental. It smacks of instability. Nip it in the bud, General. Focus on the hardware solution Lockstar is pursuing. The nation is counting on you. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Careers could end over this. Diana knew then that Pearl's solution wasn't just dismissed, it was being actively suppressed. Vance, with Bradshaw's implicit backing, tightened control. Green found himself reassigned to menial data-crunching tasks. Access to the Chimera's flight control systems was restricted. The pressure on Diana intensified. Subtle suggestions she needed rest, veiled threats about her future. The night before the Chimera was due to be transported to Nellis, Diana made her choice. Under the pretense of final systems checks, she accessed the secure terminal in a secluded part of the hangar, Green nervously keeping watch. Using codes she shouldn't have, she uploaded the flight control software patch he'd developed based on Pearl's insight and his simulation. It was a digital cage, limiting the Chimera's flight envelope, keeping it away from the aerodynamic trap Pearl had identified. Untested, unauthorized, potentially court-martial material. Dawn painted the desert in hues of rose and gold. The Chimera sat on the tarmac, sleek and menacing, ready for its ferry flight to Nellis. General Strickland, Vance, and a contingent of brass and Lockstar executives stood watching. Diana, her heart hammering against her ribs, performed the final pre-flight walk-around. Her eyes met Green's. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. As she climbed the ladder, Vance approached Strickland. General, Phillips seems off, highly strung. After the stress in that incident with the child, perhaps another pilot should ferry the bird. Strickland hesitated, looking at Diana settling into the cockpit. She looked focused, professional. She's the test pilot, Vance. She knows the bird best. Proceed, Captain Phillips. Diana strapped in, running through checklists with robotic precision. The modified software loaded silently. Please, Pearl, be right. She fired the engines. The familiar, powerful whine filled her world. Taxi, line up, final clearance. Tower, Chimera 1, ready for departure. Chimera 1. Whine's calm, cleared for takeoff, runway 21 left. Diana pushed the throttles forward. Acceleration pressed her back into the seat. The desert blurred. Faster, faster. The critical point approached, the speed and angle where the ghost had struck. She felt the subtle buffet, the precursor to the vortex formation her software was now programmed to avoid. The flight controls subtly resisted her, nudging the nose down slightly, bleeding off a fraction of speed. Vance scowled, suspicion warring with the evidence before him. The jet flew perfectly. The NATO Joint Strike demonstration at Nellis AFB was a spectacle of military might. Fighters from a dozen nations roared through the desert sky, but all eyes were on the sleek, dark shape waiting in the holding pattern. Inside the Chimera, Diana felt a profound calm. The patch worked. The ghost was banished. As she received clearance for the demonstration run, she pushed the throttles forward, not to the absolute limit, but deep into the high-performance envelope, carefully skirting the edge of Pearl's forbidden zone. The Chimera responded like a living thing, accelerating with brutal efficiency, carving impossible turns with silent agility, demonstrating thrust vectoring that defied physics. It wasn't just flying, it was dominating the sky. On the observation deck, generals, diplomats, and defense ministers watched in awe. The murmurs were of admiration, of technological leapfrogging. Brigadier General Strickland stood tall, the weight lifted. Lockstar's Vance managed a tight smile, the contract dollars practically visible in his eyes. Only Congressman Bradshaw looked vaguely displeased. His political interference rendered moot by success. Later, at Nellis, a small ceremony was hastily arranged. Strickland, humbled and grateful, stood before the assembled team and press. Project Chimera's success today belongs to the incredible dedication and ingenuity of the men and women of the U.S. Air Force and our partners at Lockstar. Vance puffed out his chest. But, Strickland continued, his voice dropping slightly, sometimes ingenuity comes from the most unexpected places. He gestured to the side. This young lady, Pearl Clark, with her remarkable intuition honed by her grandfather, retired Master Sergeant Walter Clark, identified the critical aerodynamic anomaly that threatened this program. Her insight, combined with the technical expertise of Lieutenant Tyler Green and the decisive action of Captain Diana Phillips, solved the unsolvable. Cameras flashed. Pearl blinked, overwhelmed. Diana knelt beside her, pointing to the Chimera gleaming on the tarmac. "You did it, Pearl. You fixed the jet." A Lockstar executive standing near Congressman Bradshaw muttered, "A child. Preposterous." Bradshaw, forcing a smile for the cameras, leaned over and whispered something sharp to the executive. Vance, standing nearby, overheard Bradshaw's hissed words. "Deal with the narrative. Lockstar engineered the solution. The child story is a charming anecdote. Focus on the hardware." Vance's eyes met Diana's across the tarmac. He saw the cold fury there. The warning. He remembered the flawless flight. The software logs Diana had secured. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head to the Lockstar executive. The political machine would spin, but the truth, for now, had wings. Pearl looked up at Diana, then at the magnificent machine she'd helped save. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She turned to the murmuring crowd, her clear, young voice cutting through the noise. She looked directly at where Vance and the Lockstar executive stood, her eyes bright with intelligence and a touch of defiance. "Well," Pearl said, echoing the challenge that had simmered in her since the dismissal at the gate, the challenge that had become her silent battle cry. "If you're so smart," she paused, letting the words hang, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Then why couldn't you fix your jet engine?" A stunned silence fell, followed by a burst of laughter, first from Walt, then from Diana and Green, then rippling through the assembled airmen and even some of the diplomats. It was laughter born of relief, of absurdity, and of undeniable truth. The laughter of the impossible made real by an 11-year-old girl who listened when engines talked. Pearl Clark just grinned, the desert sun glinting off her new flight suit, the undisputed hero of the day. The sound of a perfectly functioning jet engine was her victory song. If you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.